Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling something that is almost certainly sitting in your cupboard right now.
Or maybe even in your hand as you're listening.
Exactly. It is the world's second most consumed beverage, beaten only, and I mean only, by water itself. We are talking about tea.
It's so deceptive, isn't it? Because on the surface, it's dried leaves and hot water. It feels so simple.
Right. But when you actually dig into the stack of sources we have for today, you realize that simple leaf is actually, well, it's a vehicle for religion.
A trigger for massive geopolitical wars.
A product of industrial espionage that honestly reads like a spy thriller.
And, a bit of a botanical miracle. It really is. And the scale of it is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. What are the numbers?
We're talking about approximately 5 billion cups.
5 billion?
Consumed every single day.
That's just staggering. So our mission for this deep dive is to trace the journey of that one leaf Camellia sinensis.
Right. We want to go from its origins as this bitter medicinal soup in ancient forests,
all the way to the refined global beverage we know today. And we're going to unpack the chemistry, too. Like, why is green tea green?
And why is a pure tea so dark and earthy? They come from the same plant, which is the crazy part.
Exactly. And we've got a great stack of sources today. We're looking at historical texts like The Way of Tea. We've got agricultural deep dives and some really fascinating cultural histories.
Yeah, covering everything from the tea horse road to the modern chemistry of L-theanine.
And there are some serious aha moments coming up.
Oh, totally.
Like why the entire world basically only uses 2 words for tea. It's either a version of tea or a version of cha.
And that single word tells you exactly how it got to your country.
Or how a Scottish spy just stole tea from China.
And the fact that for a huge chunk of history, you didn't drink tea, you ate it.
Yes. That one blew my mind.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in. Let's go to the origins. Because like all good ancient history, this starts with a myth.
A really weird myth.
The legend of Shen Nong.
The divine farmer.
Okay, so the story goes, we're talking 2737 BCE. And Shen Nong isn't just an emperor. In the mythology, he's this semi-divine figure.
Right, and he had this very convenient superpower.
The detail that always gets me. He allegedly had a transparent belly.
Exactly. The legend says he could literally look down and watch his own digestive system working.
Which, I mean, that's handy if you're the father of Chinese medicine.
And your job is testing hundreds of herbs on yourself.
Which sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was. The story goes that he once ingested something like 72 different poisonous plants in a single day.
Just to see what would happen.
To test their effects, yeah. And he was basically lying on the ground, dying, his body just riddled with toxins.
And this is where tea makes its grand entrance.
Precisely. So he's boiling a pot of water because he had famously mandated that all his subjects boil water for hygiene.
Smart guy.
And a gust of wind blows a few leaves from a nearby bush into his pot.
Just by chance.
Just by chance. He drinks the brew, and because of his transparent stomach, he literally watches as the liquid flows through him and starts cleansing the toxins.
He can see it working?
He sees it neutralize the poisons, and he feels instantly reinvigorated.
And just like that, tea is discovered as the ultimate antidote.
It's a great story. It really frames how the Chinese viewed tea at first, not as a beverage for pleasure, but as a powerful, powerful medicine.
But there's another legend, too. This one comes more from the Japanese tradition, and it's a little more gruesome.
You're thinking of Bodhidharma.
Yeah, the founder of Zen Buddhism.
So this legend says Bodhidharma was meditating in a cave for 9 years straight. His goal was to achieve enlightenment, and he was determined not to fall asleep.
But 9 years is a long time.
It is. And eventually, exhaustion just took over, and he dozed off.
And he was so furious with himself for this moment of weakness that he did what any rational person would do.
He cut off his own eyelids.
He cut them off and threw them on the ground.
Threw them on the cave floor, all to ensure his eyes would never, ever close again during meditation.
And where the eyelids landed.
The very first tea bushes grew. The legend says the leaves were shaped like eyelids, and they contain this magical power to keep a meditator awake and focused.
Which is a very, very colorful way of explaining caffeine, isn't it?
It is. It connects the physical effect of the plant, the alertness, directly to its spiritual function in Zen Buddhism. A perfect metaphor.
Okay, so those are the legends. Divine farmers, detached eyelids. Let's get into the botanical reality. Where does this plant actually come from?
For that, we need to look at a very specific biological corridor. It's the region where the borders of southwest China, specifically Yunnan province, meet Myanmar, and the Assam region of India.
So that whole mountainous area is ground zero.
That's ground zero for Camellia sinensis. Ancient wild tea trees still grow there today.
And back then, thousands of years ago, they weren't brewing a delicate cup of Earl Grey.
Oh, not even close. The indigenous people in those highlands, who were really the ancestors of modern tea cultivation, they treated it as a vegetable.
A vegetable?
They called it tu, and it was, well, it was incredibly bitter.
Not pleasant.
No, the leaves of the wild tea trees are tough and really potent, so they would do things to make it edible. They'd chop them up, maybe ferment them to break down that bitterness, or boil them into a thick soup.
This is the part that blows my mind. The soup era of tea.
It lasted for centuries. Before tea was a solo beverage, it was just one ingredient in a big, savory broth.
So what else was in there?
You'd have your tea leaves, sure, but you'd also toss in ginger, scallions, jujubes, which are these Chinese red dates.
Okay.
Orange peel, maybe some dogwood, mint. It was a whole medley.
It sounds more like a medicine ball soup from a cafe than a cup of tea.
And it was. It was nutritious. You're getting fiber, you're getting antioxidants, you're getting caffeine, but it wasn't refined. And this brings us to a really pivotal figure in history, Lu Yu.
The tea sage. I love this guy's backstory. He was an orphan, raised by monks, runs away to join the circus as a clown, and then somehow becomes the most important person in the entire history of tea.
A true Renaissance man of the Tang Dynasty. So in the 8th century, he writes this hugely influential book, the Cha Jing, or the Classic of Tea. And Lu Yu was a purist.
A tea snob, basically.
The original tea snob. He looked at the soup everyone was drinking with the onions and the ginger and everything else, and he was just appalled.
What did he call it?
He famously referred to it as the slop of the ditch, or ditch water.
Harsh.
But effective. Lu Yu argued that tea had its own spirit, its own delicate flavor that was being totally masked by all this other garbage people were throwing in the pot.
He advocated for simplicity.
For purity. Just tea and water, maybe a pinch of salt. And because his book became so famous, the entire culture shifted. We moved from that soup era into what we call the 3 golden ages of Chinese tea.
Let's unpack those, because the sources describe these 3 really distinct eras, and they match up perfectly with the dynasties. It's like the technology of drinking tea evolved over time.
Precisely. First up, you have the Tang Dynasty, which is roughly 618 to 907 CE. This is what we call the Age of Cake Tea.
Cake tea, like a birthday cake.
No, like a compressed brick. You have to remember, transport in ancient China was difficult. You couldn't just carry around big bags of loose leaves. They'd get crushed, they'd rot.
So they needed a way to preserve it and make it portable.
Exactly. So the process was to steam the fresh leaves, pound them into a paste, and then press them into molds to create these dense cakes or bricks.
So if you wanted a cup of tea, you had to, chip a piece off?
That's exactly it. You'd break off a chunk, roast it over a fire to sterilize it and kind of wake up the flavor.
Okay.
Then you'd grind that roasted piece into a fine powder and boil it in water.
So it's still pretty involved.
Very involved. And interestingly, during the Tang Dynasty, they were still often adding a pinch of salt.
Salt in tea? That sounds strange.
It actually cuts the bitterness. It rounds out the flavor. It's actually quite nice if you try it with certain teas.
Okay, so that's Tang, cakes and salt. Then we move into the Song Dynasty, starting around 960 CE.
And this is the age of whipped tea.
This is where things get very artistic.
Very artistic. In the Song Dynasty, the fashion completely changed. Instead of boiling the powder, they would grind it into an almost microscopic powder. Super, super fine.
Finer than before.
Much finer. They put a scoop of this powder in a wide bowl, add a little hot water, and then whisk it vigorously with a bamboo whisk until it frothed up into a thick, creamy foam.
That sounds exactly like the Japanese tea ceremony, like making matcha.
It is the Japanese tea ceremony. Japan imported its tea culture directly from China during the Song Dynasty. So while China eventually moved on to other methods, Japan basically preserved this whisk powder style.
So matcha is essentially a time capsule of Song Dynasty China.
It's liquid history. It really is. And the Song era was incredibly romantic about tea. They had these elaborate tea contests where scholar officials would compete to see whose froth was the most stable and would last the longest.
I can just picture that.
They wrote poetry about the patterns in the foam, but it wasn't all art. It was also an era of heavy government involvement. This is when the famous Tea Horse Road became a vital economic artery.
Right, I read about this in the sources. They were literally trading tea for horses.
That's right. China, you have to remember, was constantly under threat from nomadic tribes in the north, especially the Mongols. They needed war horses.
And Tibet had the horses.
Tibet had famously strong horses, but because they lived on the high plateau, their diet was basically yak meat, milk, and barley. They had almost no access to vegetables or essential vitamins.
So tea became their vegetable, the vitamins, the antioxidants.
Exactly. The Chinese government established a state-sponsored monopoly on the trade. Compressed tea bricks for Tibetan war horses. It was a massive economic engine. Millions of pounds of tea were carried up into the Himalayas on the backs of human porters.
Unbelievable. Okay, so Tang was cakes, Song was whipped powder. Then we get to the Ming Dynasty, starting around 1368. And this is the age of steeping.
This is basically how we all drink tea today.
And it all started with a decree from the top.
It did. The very first Ming emperor, the Hongwu emperor, came from a peasant background. He was a populist. And he looked at the whole system of making compressed tea cakes for tribute and thought it was too decadent, too expensive, and way too labor-intensive for the common people.
She just banned it.
He banned it. He issued a decree saying, stop making the cakes, just send me the loose leaves.
And that one simple regulatory change completely altered the technology of tea.
Completely, because you can't whisk loose leaves into a froth, and you don't need to grind them, you just need to steep them. But for that, you need a new kind of vessel.
You can't just boil them in a big cauldron anymore.
No, you need something to hold the heat and, crucially, to strain the leaves when you pour.
Enter the teapot.
Enter the teapot. Specifically, the famous Yixing clay pots from the Jiangsu region. They were invented during the Ming Dynasty precisely to accommodate this new loose-leaf style of brewing.
And the processing changed, too.
Yes, because farmers were now dealing with whole, loose leaves, they started experimenting. They noticed if they let the leaves sit out for a while and wither, the flavor changed. If they bruised them a bit, it changed even more. This is when oolong and black teas were born.
That is the perfect segue to the science of the leaf. Mm-hmm. Because I think for a long time, I, like many people, just assumed green tea and black tea were different plants. You know, you plant a green tea seed or a black tea seed.
It's a very common misconception. But no, it is all from one plant, Camellia sinensis. Whether it's a delicate silvery white tea or a smoky lapsang souchong, it starts as the same leaf.
The difference is purely in the processing.
It's all chemistry. Specifically, it's about controlling one single process. Oxidation.
You used a great analogy in our pre-show chat, the banana analogy.
Right. Think of a tea leaf like a banana or an apple. You cut an apple open and leave it on the counter. What happens?
It turns brown?
It turns brown. That's enzymatic browning or oxidation. The enzymes inside the fruit cells are reacting with oxygen in the air. The exact same thing starts to happen to a tea leaf the moment you pluck it from the bush.
So all of tea processing is just the art of controlling that browning.
Precisely. You're either trying to stop it, encourage it, or stop it somewhere in the middle.
So let's run through the 6 main categories because the sources break this down so beautifully. Let's start with green tea. The goal there is no browning.
Exactly. Green tea is unoxidized. You want to keep it green. So the moment the leaves are picked, the farmers have to apply intense heat to them. This crucial step is called shaking or kill green.
Kill green, it sounds so intense.
It just means they're killing or deactivating the enzymes responsible for oxidation. They'll either toss the leaves in a giant hot wok, that's the Chinese method, or steam them, which is the Japanese method.
And that heat locks in the green color and the flavor.
Instantly. It freezes the leaf in time. That's why green tea tastes so fresh, vegetal, grassy. You're tasting the pure, unoxidized leaf.
Okay. What about white tea then? That seems even more simple.
White tea is the minimalist approach to tea making. You pick the leaf, usually the very young, fuzzy buds, and you just let it wither and dry.
That's it. No rolling, no frying.
Nothing. You just let it dry naturally in the sun or in a controlled room. It oxidizes a tiny, tiny bit just from that process. But it's really all about preserving the pure, delicate, natural flavor of the plant itself.
Then we get to yellow tea, which I admit I've rarely seen. It's not very common.
It's rare even in China. It's a very tricky process. It starts like a green tea, but then they add an extra step called smothering or yellowing. Yeah, they'll wrap the still damp hot leaves in paper or cloth and let them gently steam in their own aroma for a few hours. This causes a very slight non-enzymatic oxidation.
What does that do to the flavor?
It mellows it out. It gets rid of that sharp, grassy bite that some green teas have and creates a smoother, sweeter profile. It's very subtle.
Okay, now for my favorite category, Oolong. The variety here is just insane. You can have these bright floral oolongs or creamy ones or dark roasted ones.
Oolong is, without a doubt, the most technically complex and artistic tea to make. It's defined as being semi-oxidized. It's the whole spectrum between green and black.
So how do they control it so precisely?
The master tea maker will toss and shake the leaves, usually in big bamboo trays, to gently bruise the edges of the leaves.
They're intentionally damaging them.
Just a little bit. By breaking the cell walls on the edges, they start the oxidation process there while the center of the leaf remains green. It's a balancing act.
They can stop it at any point.
Exactly. They can stop it early with maybe 20% oxidation for a greener, more floral oolong, or they can let it go much longer to 70 or 80% for a darker, fruitier, more roasted character. It's a true art form.
And if you just let that process go all the way, just let it completely oxidize.
Then you get black tea, or, as they call it in China, hong cha, which means red tea.
Why red tea?
Because the brewed liquid is a reddish-brown color. For black tea, you roll the leaves much more aggressively to break all the cell walls, expose all the juices to the air, and let it oxidize completely until it turns a dark brown.
And that's what gives you those malty, tannic, robust flavors we associate with English breakfast tea.
That's it exactly.
Okay, that's 5. But there is a 6th category that I think people always get confused about.
Yeah.
Dark tea, with the most famous example being pure.
This is the real outlier. All the other teas we've talked about involve oxidation, which is an enzymatic process.
Yeah.
Dark tea involves actual fermentation.
There is a critical difference.
A huge difference. Fermentation is microbial. It's like making yogurt or cheese or wine. You're using bacteria and fungi to transform the material.
So how do they do that with tea?
They'll take a base tea, often a sun-dried green tea, pile it up in a warm, humid environment, and let natural microbes from the air colonize the leaves and ferment them over weeks or months.
That sounds risky, like it could go wrong.
It absolutely can, but when it's done right, it breaks down the bitterness and creates these incredibly smooth, deep, earthy flavors. You get notes of wood, mushroom, damp forest floor.
And unlike other teas, pure gets better with age.
It's the only category that truly improves with age. You can drink a 50-year-old pure, and it can be one of the most incredible things you've ever tasted.
So we have this amazing spectrum of flavors all developed in China, but for a very long time, this was China's secret. How did he get out into the world?
Well, it leaked out slowly at first, mostly through religious channels. We mentioned the Japanese monks earlier.
Right, Aizai.
In the 12th century, a Zen monk named Aisai brought tea seeds back to Japan because he found it was the perfect tool to aid in long meditation sessions. It kept him awake but calm.
And Japan took those seeds and really ran with them, developing their own unique culture around it. The Chedo, the way of tea.
Which is very structured, very formal, very ritualistic. But then you look at Korea, they also got tea from China. They developed dairy, which means etiquette for tea. It was a much more naturalistic, less rigid style than the Japanese one.
But the real global explosion happened when the Europeans finally showed up.
The Portuguese and the Dutch in the 1600s, they were the first to establish sea trade routes to China, and they found this curious drink.
And one particular person is key here, right? Portuguese princess.
Catherine of Braganza. She is a pivotal figure for tea in the West.
She's the one who married King Charles II of England.
Yes. And when she arrived in England in 1662, she brought a large chest of tea as part of her royal dowry. She was a major trendsetter. The British aristocracy saw this exotic princess drinking her tea, and they all wanted to copy her.
So it became a fashionable high society drink.
It started in the palace, then moved to the coffee houses, and eventually, over the next century, it completely replaced gin and ale as the standard morning beverage in places like London and even New York.
Which was probably a net positive for society's productivity, I'm guessing.
Oh, definitely. Replacing morning alcohol with a mild stimulant fundamentally transformed the workforce. But here is one of those fantastic linguistic aha moments we promised earlier.
The te versus cha divide.
The word you use for tea in your language depends entirely on which trade route brought it to your ancestors. It's a perfect linguistic map.
Okay, break that down.
If your country got tea via the land route, so the Silk Road traveling west from China, you use a variation of the Mandarin word for tea, which is cha.
So that would be Russia.
In Russia, it's chai. In Persia, chai. In Turkey, say. India, chai. They all got it from the northern Chinese dialects where it's pronounced with that sound.
But the other half of the world says tea.
Right. If your country got tea via the sea route, brought by Dutch traders, you use the word from the coastal Fujian dialect where the Dutch were trading.
And in that dialect, the word is pronounced differently.
In the Minnan dialect of Fujian, the character for tea is pronounced te,
So the Dutch took tea back to Europe.
and te became tea in English, te in French, and tea in German. It's a perfect marker of historical trade.
That's so cool. So if I say chai, I'm linguistically referencing the Silk Road. If I say tea, I'm referencing the Dutch ships.
Precisely. With one really interesting exception, which is Myanmar. They use the word lafet, which probably comes from an ancient indigenous root, suggesting they were consuming tea long before either of those major trade routes were established.
Now, speaking of the British and their sea routes, their obsession with tea created some massive geopolitical problems. We have to talk about the dark side of this.
We do. The trade imbalance. By the 1800s, Britain was buying an absolutely insane amount of tea from China. But China wasn't interested in buying British wool or other manufactured goods. They saw themselves as the center of the world. They didn't need anything from the barbarians.
So they only accepted one form of payment.
Silver. And Britain was just bleeding silver. They were facing a massive trade deficit that was threatening to bankrupt the nation.
So the British East India Company, which was this quasi-governmental megacorporation, came up with let's call it a morally bankrupt solution.
That's putting it mildly. They started growing opium on a massive scale in their Indian territories and then smuggled it into China against Chinese law to sell for silver,
which they then used to buy tea.
They were funding their national tea habit by creating a massive addiction crisis in China.
It's just horrific when you think about it.
It led directly to the Opium Wars, which were a devastating and humiliating period for China. But even with that, the British knew this wasn't a sustainable model. They were completely vulnerable. China still had a global monopoly on tea production.
If China decided to cut off the supply, the entire British economy would grind to a halt.
So they needed to make their own tea. They had the land in India, but they didn't have the plants. They didn't have the processing know-how. The secrets were all locked away inside China.
Enter Robert Fortune.
The Scottish botanist and corporate spy. This story is just wild. The East India Company hired him for one mission: go into the interior of China, which was completely forbidden to foreigners, and steal the secrets of tea.
It was straight up industrial espionage on a grand scale.
It was. Fortune had to go in disguise.
Yeah.
He shaved the front of his head, wore a fake braided ponytail or a queue, and dressed in the robes of a Mandarin official. He learned just enough of the language to pass as a merchant from a distant province.
If he had been caught, he would have been executed, no question.
Absolutely. He traveled deep into the tea mountains of Fujian and Anhui, and he didn't just steal seeds and seedlings, he stole intellectual property.
What did he find?
Well, he was the one who definitively proved that the green tea and black tea the West was buying were actually from the same plant species. That was a huge debate in Europe at the time.
And he also found out something pretty nasty about the tea that was being exported, right?
He did. He went into the factories and discovered that the Chinese manufacturers were dyeing the green tea with Prussian blue, a toxic pigment in gypsum, basically plaster powder.
Why would they do that?
Because Westerners, in their ignorance, liked their green tea to look really, really bright green. They thought that was a sign of quality. So the Chinese were literally painting the tea to meet market demand.
So the pure Chinese tea the British so desperately craved was actually painted poison.
In many cases, yes. So Fortune managed to smuggle out tens of thousands of tea seedlings, and crucially, he convinced several experienced Chinese tea workers to come with him to India.
And that was the birth of the Indian tea industry. Darjeeling, Assam.
It broke the Chinese monopoly forever. Within just a few decades, British India was outproducing China, and tea became a truly global commodity, no longer controlled by a single nation.
It's just amazing how much drama, politics, and espionage is packed into a single cup. But once it went global, it didn't just stay the same. Every culture that touched it seemed to change it.
That's the beauty of its adaptation. I mean, look at Myanmar. They went full circle, right back to the origins. They still eat tea.
You mean lafette?
Lafette, which is pickled tea. They ferment fresh tea leaves and serve them as a savory salad with fried garlic, chilies, beans, and crunchy nuts. It's a national dish.
I would love to try that.
It's intense and delicious. Then you go to Tibet. We mentioned the butter tea earlier. It's a survival ration.
Right. It's not a delicate drink.
Not at all. It's strong brick tea, salt, and a huge lump of yak butter, all churned together into a thick, soupy, high-calorie energy drink. It's fuel for living at 15,000 feet.
And Russia.
The samovar, this big ornate metal urn that keeps water boiling all day. They make a super concentrated tea extract called zavarka, and then each person dilutes a little bit of it in their cup with the hot water.
And they drink it with jam, right?
Often, yes. Either stir it into the tea, or more traditionally, they'd hold a sugar cube between their teeth and sip the tea through it.
Then we get to the United States. And we did some weird things to tea.
Well, the story of iced tea is famously American. It comes from the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. It was a scorching hot summer, and a tea vendor from India was having no luck selling his hot beverage.
Nobody wanted hot tea in that heat.
So in a moment of desperation, he just dumped a bunch of ice into his brewed tea, and boom, iced tea was a massive hit. It was popularized right there.
And the tea bag.
Yeah.
I feel like that's our other major contribution.
An accidental invention, really. Around 1901, a New York tea merchant named Thomas Sullivan started sending out samples in small silk pouches. The intention was for customers to open the pouch and dump the leaves out.
But people are lazy.
People are lazy, they just threw the whole pouch in the water, it was convenient, and it stuck. Even though it's usually associated with the lowest grade of tea, the fannings or dust left over from processing whole leaves.
And we can't forget the most recent major innovation, bubble tea.
Or boba, originating in Taiwan in the 1980s. It's really a dessert beverage hybrid. You have sweetened milk tea with these chewy tapioca pearls at the bottom.
It's become a global craze. It completely bridges that gap between a beverage and a snack.
It's funny, we've gone from literally eating tea as a vegetable in ancient times to drinking it for millennia, and now with bubble tea, we're kind of eating it again.
We are. You're chewing on the pearls. History really does rhyme.
It does.
So what does this all mean for us today? I mean, you walk into a grocery store, and there are just walls of tea. We have more options than Emperor Shennong could have ever imagined.
We do, and I think there's a renewed interest in the thing that started it all, the health benefits. We're circling back to why the monks loved it. Modern science has isolated a unique amino acid in tea called L-theanine.
Right, that's the calm alertness chemical.
That is the magic ingredient. Caffeine gives you energy, but it can also give you the jitters. L-theanine actually promotes alpha brainwaves, which are associated with a state of relaxed awareness.
So when you combine them,
You get this incredible synergy, a state of focused calm. That's why monks could meditate for hours on it, and it's why arguably it's a much better beverage for deep work than coffee.
it's the original nootropic.
It really is.
So we've tracked this leaf from the transparent belly of a mythical emperor to the satchels of British spies, all the way to the boba shop down the street. It has been quite a journey.
It's a powerful reminder that no object in our daily lives is without a deep, complex story.
Absolutely. So what is the final takeaway for our listener? When they brew their next cup, what should they be thinking about?
I would say, think about the process. When you taste that tea, try to identify the history in the flavor. Is it bright and glassy? That's the Kilgreen step, that heat that was perfected in the Ming Dynasty. Is it malty and dark? That's the full oxidation the British crave for their morning cup. Is it earthy? That's that ancient microbial fermentation.
And ask yourself, are you drinking a tea or a cha?
Exactly. Connect the liquid in your cup to the trade route that brought it to your culture.
Connecting the drops to the ocean of history. I love it.
And here's a provocative thought to leave you with. We talked about how tea adapted to every culture it touched, becoming a ceremony in Japan, a spice mix in India, a sweet iced drink in the US. But the tea plant itself is actually quite fragile.
Weird.
It needs very specific altitudes, soil, and moisture levels to produce its unique flavors. And with climate change, shifting weather patterns, and delicate growing regions like Darjeeling and Yunnan, the flavor of the world's best teas is actually changing.
So the tea we drink today might not taste the same in the future.
The champagne of teas from Darjeeling might not taste the same in 20 years. The character is shifting. We're drinking a product of a very specific climate and a very specific time.
That is a very sobering thought.
It is. So savor it. Every cup is liquid geography, and that geography is in flux.
A reason to appreciate every single sip. Thank you for guiding us through this incredible story.
My pleasure. It was fun.
And thank you to everyone listening. We will see you on the next deep dive. Stay curious.